I sat there, frozen, the laughter from a second ago still hanging in the air like a cruel joke. Vanessa, 27, had just stood up in front of all our friends, clinked her glass, and without a moment of hesitation, tore my dignity to shreds. The words kept ringing in my head. I finally see him as a true best friend and nothing more. The restaurant suddenly felt suffocating. Every stare like a knife in my back, waiting to see what I'd say, what I'd do. My heartbeat pounded in my ears, but there was no dramatic explosion. Just cold realization. She planned this. She rehearsed it. She probably laughed about it with her friends beforehand, picturing me sitting here like a goddamn idiot. And me? Like a complete fool. I spent weeks planning this night. Picking the venue, coordinating dates, inviting her friends, most of whom I didn't even like. Order that stupid surprise cake. All for what? Just to be a fucking prop in her little announcement? Somewhere on the edge of my consciousness, someone coughed awkwardly. A few of her friends giggled like it was some dumb joke. But Vanessa kept standing there with that smug grin, basking in her own revelation, completely oblivious, or just indifferent to how I felt in that moment. I pushed my chair back slowly. The screech of the legs against the floor sounded like a funeral bell. I didn't say a word, didn't make a scene, just stood up, threw on my coat, and walked out. My phone buzzed the second I stepped outside. Then again, and again. You're being dramatic. You embarrass me in front of my friends. I thought we were mature enough to handle this like adults. You should have stayed. I should have stayed. After getting humiliated in front of a dozen people, my friends, her friends, some random acquaintances, after realizing this whole thing was a carefully staged performance. Fuck you, Vanessa. I shoved my phone into my pocket and kept walking, never looking back. The night air was cold, burning my lungs, but for the first time in hours, I could breathe. The cold air bit at my face, but I barely felt it. My legs carried me forward like they had a mission of their own, straight through the streets, past neon-lit bars, spilling out laughter and slurred conversations. I wasn't part of that world tonight. My world had cracked in half, and I was just wandering through the wreckage, trying to figure out what the hell to do with the pieces. Vanessa kept blowing up my phone. Message after message, like she actually thought she had a right to demand anything from me after that stunt. Be an adult. Let's talk about this. You're making a scene. I wasn't making a scene. No, making a scene would have been standing on that table and letting everyone know exactly what kind of person she was. But I didn't do that. I walked out with whatever scrap of dignity I had left. Somewhere in the back of my head, I knew this wasn't just about tonight. No. This was just the grand finale of something that had been rotting for a while. I could see it now. The way she'd been pulling away, the careful distance she kept, the half-hearted kisses. I ignored it, told myself it was just stress, just life, just something we'd work through. But the truth? The truth was that she had checked out a long time ago. Tonight, she just made it official. I ended up at a shitty dive bar 3 blocks away. The kind of place where no one asks questions, where the floor is sticky with beer and regret. I ordered a drink and sat in the corner, my back against the wall, phone face down on the table. I wasn't drinking to forget. I wanted to remember. I wanted to feel every inch of this humiliation, let it burn into me, so I'd never let myself be this much of a fool again. At some point, my phone vibrated again. I ignored it, but then I saw the screen light up. Not a text this time. A picture. A picture of Vanessa. At the restaurant. Smiling, laughing, sitting way too close to some guy I didn't recognize. My stomach twisted, but I forced myself to stare at it. The bastard had his hand on her back, fingers pressing just a little too familiar. Her smile was the same one she used to give me. And the message underneath? You should have stayed. I don't remember slamming the glass down, but I do remember the sharp sting in my palm when it shattered. Heads turned. The bartender gave me a look. I threw some bills on the table and walked out. I wasn't thinking anymore. I wasn't wandering. I had a destination now. I was going back. The night felt heavier now, pressing down on me with every step. The streets were the same, the city buzzing with life, but everything had a different tint to it. The neon signs seemed harsher. The laughter spilling out of bars felt like mockery. My own damn fault. I walked around thinking I had a life, a relationship, some kind of foundation. Turns out, all I had was a front row seat to my own humiliation. I wasn't thinking straight, but I didn't need to. My body already knew where it was going. Back to the restaurant. Back to the scene of the fucking crime. By the time I got there, the party was still in full swing. I stood outside, watching through the window like some kind of ghost. Vanessa was still there, still smiling, still playing the perfect fucking host while I was out here picking glass out of my hand. The guy from the picture was next to her, leaning in, talking low. Too damn comfortable. I should have walked away. I should have let it go. But I was past that point now. I walked in. Heads turned. My presence spread through the room like a slow ripple. Vanessa's eyes landed on me, and for a second, just a second, something flickered in them. Annoyance? Guilt? I don't even know if she was capable of that. She covered it up fast, flashing me that tight, practice smile. You came back, she said, like I was some lost puppy that finally found its way home. I ignored her. My eyes locked on the guy. Who the hell are you? I asked. He blinked, looked at Vanessa like she had the answer. She didn't. Not when she wanted to say out loud. Relax, man, he said, hands up like he was trying to calm a wild animal. Smart move, considering I was about 2 seconds from putting him through the nearest table. Relax. I laughed. It sounded wrong, Sharp. That's funny. Real funny. Vanessa sighed, like I was embarrassing her. Like I was the asshole here. Can we not do this right now? She muttered. I looked at her, really looked at her. The woman I spent years with. The woman I thought I knew. And I realized something. She wasn't worth this. Not this anger. Not this energy. Not a single goddamn second more of my time. I turned to leave. One last walkout for good this time. But as I stepped away, I heard the guy chuckle. Low. Dismissive. Guess you were just the warm-up, huh? He said. And that was it. I didn't think. I just moved. The next few seconds were a blur. My fist connecting with his jaw. The satisfying crack. The way he stumbled back into the table, sending glasses crashing to the floor. The room erupted into chaos. People shouting, chairs scraping. Vanessa was screaming my name, but I wasn't listening. I stood over him, breathing hard. He looked up at me, eyes wide, hand clutching his face like he couldn't believe this was real. I leaned down, voice low. Say that shit again. He didn't. I straightened up, rolled my shoulders, looked around at the mess I made. Vanessa was staring at me, hands over her mouth, like she couldn't believe I'd done it. Like she didn't start this whole damn thing. I turned and walked out. For real this time. The cold air hit me, but it didn't feel the same. It wasn't sharp anymore. It wasn't cutting through me. I wasn't walking away in shame. Not tonight. Tonight I was free. The night had teeth, and it sunk them into me the second I stepped out of that godforsaken restaurant. I didn't feel the cold anymore. Didn't feel the ache in my knuckles or the sting of what I'd just done. All I felt was something breaking loose inside me, something that had been wound too tight for too damn long. I kept walking. Blocks blurred past. Neon signs smeared into streaks of color. The hum of the city bleeding together into one distant roar. I wasn't running, but I wasn't standing still either. The weight that had been pressing down on me for months, hell, maybe years, was peeling away layer by layer like dead skin sloughing off. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I let it go. Then again. And again. Vanessa. I didn't check the messages, didn't need to. I already knew what they'd say. Maybe some bullshit about how I'd overreacted, how I'd embarrassed her, how I should have handled it better. Or maybe, just maybe, some twisted attempt to make herself the victim. She always was good at that. I ducked into a late-night diner, the kind that smelled like burnt coffee and stale grease. A couple of drunks slumped in the corner, a waitress with tired eyes wiping down the counter. I took a seat by the window and stared out at the street, watching my reflection in the glass like I was seeing myself for the first time in years. She did me a favor. That thought hit me like a freight train. I'd spent so much time twisting myself into knots, trying to be the right kind of boyfriend, the right kind of man, the kind who plans birthdays and listens to the same damn stories about her coworkers and lets shit slide because that's just how she is. But none of it mattered. None of it ever fucking mattered. She made her choice. And now, finally, I was making mine. The door jingled behind me. Someone walked in, heavy steps, the scrape of a chair pulling back. I didn't look up at first, wasn't in the mood for conversation. But then a voice cut through the silence. Didn't think I'd see you again tonight. I glanced up. The bartender from the dive bar earlier. Didn't think I'd be worth remembering, I muttered. He snorted, waving the waitress over. Hard to forget a guy who smashes a glass with his bare hand and walks out like it didn't happen. I huffed out something that was almost a laugh. Yeah, well, been that kind of night. He ordered coffee. Sat back. Didn't push for conversation. Just let the silence sit there. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was just there. So what now? He asked after a while, stirring his coffee with the handle of his spoon. I didn't answer right away. I watched the city move outside, cars cutting through the rain-slick streets, people stumbling out of bars, heads tilted back in drunken laughter. Life didn't stop just because mine had flipped upside down. I don't know, I finally admitted. But whatever it is, it's going to be mine. The bartender nodded like he understood. Maybe he did. I finished my coffee, left a few bills on the table, and stepped back into the night. This time, I wasn't wandering. I wasn't lost. I was just getting started. The thing about hitting rock bottom is that it's not the end. People like to say it is, but it's not. It's a hard, ugly foundation, sure, but if you're still breathing, you're still building. And me? I was still breathing. It took a while. Longer than I'd like to admit. The days after that night were a mess of emotions I didn't know what to do with. Anger, humiliation, relief. A cocktail of shit that settled into my bones, making every step feel heavier than it should have been. But the world didn't stop moving just because my life got nuked. Bills still needed paying. The sun still rose. And I still had to figure out who the hell I was outside of being the guy who got dumped in front of a dinner crowd. The first thing I did was delete Vanessa's number. It wasn't some grand symbolic gesture. I just didn't trust myself not to pick up if she called again. Because she did. A lot. The messages went from defensive to apologetic to nostalgic, all in the span of a week. I didn't answer a single one. Not because I was strong, but because I knew that if I did, she'd pull me back in, the way she always did. And I wasn't about to be that guy anymore. I moved out of our apartment. She got the lease, and I got the freedom. It felt like I was getting the better deal. The funny thing about starting over is that it's a lot like being drunk. You make mistakes, you stumble, you wake up in places you don't recognize, wondering how the hell you got there. I made a lot of mistakes. I said yes to things just because they weren't her. I went on dates with women I had no real interest in, just to prove to myself I could. I drank too much, slept too little, punched a wall once, just to feel something that wasn't whatever the hell was eating me up inside. But eventually, the chaos settled. I found a new place, a shitty little studio apartment that smelled like cigarettes and bad decisions. But it was mine. I bought furniture secondhand, patched up the walls, made it feel like something I could call home. It was small, it was imperfect, but for the first time in a long time, so was I. Work kept me grounded. I threw myself into it, taking extra shifts, saying yes to projects I used to avoid. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I just needed something to keep my mind from drifting to places it had no business going. It helped, gave me structure, and after a while, I started to feel like a person again. Not Vanessa's ex, not the guy who got humiliated at a birthday dinner. Just me. Months passed, then a year. The texts from her stopped. The anger dulled into something quieter. And one day, I woke up and realized I didn't care anymore. Not in the bitter, I'm over it, way people fake when they're still hurt. I mean, really, truly didn't care. She was just another person in a world full of people. And I was finally free of whatever hold she had on me. One night, I walked into that same diner from before. The one with the burnt coffee and the tired waitress. The bartender from that night wasn't there, but the place was still the same. The same hum of conversation, the same shitty fluorescent lighting. I took a seat by the window and ordered a coffee. Black, no sugar. Something about it felt full circle. And as I sat there, watching the city move around me, I realized something. I wasn't the same guy who walked in that night, dragging his pride behind him like roadkill. I had scars now. Some visible, some not. But they weren't wounds anymore. They were just part of the story. And the best part? I was finally the one writing it.